you think the founder of Amazon.com does not quite fit your image of a captain of industry, wait till you meet Danny Ferris. He's the subject of tonight's classic, one of our favorites, by the way, and he, too, is a path-breaking businessman and pioneer, but in prison. We call the story 1-800-CON-MAN. For 4 years, this crafty con man ran a nationwide jailhouse shopping network without ever leaving his cell in Miami's Dade County Jail, where inmates were permitted telephones in their jail cells and were able to make 1-800 calls free of charge. His appearance on 60 Minutes back in 1991 changed his life. We'll have more about that in a moment, but first, let's go back to 1991 and hear just how Danny Ferris was able to make between $2 and $4 million out of his jail cell.
I would challenge you, Mr. Wallace, if they put you in a room the size of your bathroom at home for years at a time with a telephone, that I would challenge you that you would come up with some pretty inventive stuff to do, because you do everything through the phone.
And that's exactly what Danny Ferris did. Using a telephone from a large cell on the 10th floor of Miami's Dade County Jail, and later from this 6 by 8 foot cell, federal investigators acknowledge he managed to steal as much as $2 million worth of merchandise. And how did the business work? Accomplices on the outside provided Ferris with hundreds of credit card numbers taken from charge slips in hotel dumpsters. And then he used those credit card numbers to order merchandise from mail-order catalogs by telephone, arranging for the items to be delivered overnight. Again, to accomplices on the outside who would sell the goods and split the proceeds with Ferris. Ferris even persuaded his fellow inmates to let him use their extension telephone as his own private line. You take the extension phone into your cell.
Actually, it was a vacant cell that I quite literally had turned into an office. We were having a ball.
And you did business?
Oh, yes, sir, a bumper business.
Ferris ordered everything from collectible gold and silver coins to Rolex watches to video camcorders. And with the help of those accomplices on the outside, he hit states from one end of the country to the other.
Oh, it's so easy to find Confederates. I split right half with everybody. I mean, I never took more than half. I got robbed a lot, but again, you kind of take it on the chin, you know what I mean? It was, like you said, heck, it was all free.
But what about the cops? Well, they were not amused by the jailhouse shopping network.
I think Danny Ferris is a convicted killer and a con man, nothing more.
Lieutenant Ross Hughes and fellow officer Raul Ubieta of the Metro Dade Police spent months building a case against Ferris, and they knew he had confessed to murdering a friend while under the influence of cocaine.
He's already in jail for murder, possibly facing the electric chair, so the fellow had no fear of any reprisal for what he was, for the fraud that he was doing.
So he engaged in what is called the jailhouse shopping network.
And he was
very successful enterprise.
And he was very comfortable in that role.
And he would remain comfortably in business because Hughes and Ubieta's case against him was eventually dropped by the Dade state's attorney. Why? Insufficient credible evidence, the state's attorney said. The two Metro Dade investigators continued to warn jail officials about Ferris' continued phone access, but jail officials said it would violate Danny's rights to take his phone away. Here we go. We wanted to find out more for ourselves about telephone access for the inmates at the Dade County Jail, so we went there to take a look. There's a guy on the phone right there. And nothing had changed. We visited Danny's old cell. This was the office that Danny Ferris worked out of?
Yes, sir.
Not much bigger than somebody's bathroom. We were amazed to find a list of telephone numbers on Danny's old cell wall. So we called one. LL Bean Order Department. Can I order some merchandise this way? And I can order how much? Can I order 100 or 1,000 or $10,000 worth of stuff? No limit. My name is Mike Wallace, and I work for 60 Minutes, and I'm sitting in a cell. LL Bean hadn't heard about the jailhouse shopping network, but they did say that credit card fraud is a problem for him. And LL Bean had received an order from one Tommy Chappell, the inmate who inherited Danny's old cell. Explain something. I go into your cell, and suddenly I see on the wall.
All the Danny's numbers.
Are those Danny's numbers? Tommy Chappell wasn't about to admit that he'd actually used them to place orders, but it turns out that many inmates had learned how to use the jailhouse shopping network, courtesy of Danny Ferris.
They don't even have to be terribly intelligent and only marginally capable. It It's like a train, Mr. Wallace. I feel like I constructed a train, and just darn near anybody can drive a train. Heck, it's on a track. All you got to do is put the fuel in, credit card numbers, and this train will go.
We asked Lonnie Lawrence, the director of Dade County Corrections, to explain why the jailhouse shopping network was still alive and well.
There are legal guidelines that say that we shall provide phone access to inmates.
Inside the cell?
Yes. They don't care where you provide it as long as you provide it.
But what about inmates who abuse the phone system? For instance,
let's say he's threatening the judge who put him away on the phone.
We still have the ability to do that.
You can take that phone away?
We take the phone away.
So you can actually take phone privileges away. What you have not been able to do is to take phone privileges away from guys who are in jail and scamming over the phone.
Well, I think that we've been able to restrict their phone privileges.
I went into Danny Ferris's old cell this morning, 3 hours ago.
Right.
Right there is the telephone. Right there on the wall is a list of 1-800 numbers and credit card numbers. I called LL Bean. They were taking my order. I was playing Danny Ferris.
Right over again.
Slick as it could be.
Well, you know, we don't have a perfect system.
And nobody knows that better than Danny Ferris. He was finally sentenced to 5 years for credit card fraud on top of an earlier life term for murder. And he was moved to the Charlotte Correctional Institution, a much tougher Florida state prison where, with prison guards looking on, we met a chastened Danny Ferris.
I would like to be very clear. I don't want them perish the thought that they might think I'm still wielding my telephonic sword. You know what I mean? I can't do that.
Why not?
Here in the state prisons, it's they're much more sophisticated.
The state prisons are more sophisticated?
Yes, they're in the way that.
So what you're saying is you're going straight, perforce, now at Charlotte Correctional Center.
Yeah, well, or having to go in a new direction because well, I mean, come on, I'm not just going to roll over, Mr. Wallace.
Isn't there a lady in Fort Lauderdale you've been talking to?
I don't know. Who you...
Didn't you offer to set her up in business and rent an apartment from her as a drop site?
Oh, I'm sure that I probably did.
Recently?
See, you would get a fella in trouble with all these folks standing around us here.
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, you just professed innocence. You don't do it anymore. That's what you just told me, Danny.
I know. Well, you know, here's what I've done.
But somehow you're in touch with a lady in Fort Lauderdale renting an apartment which is going to be a drop site where you are ordering, or she is ordering, or somebody is ordering camcorders and things like this.
As he nervously takes a drink of his root beer.
I mean, you're a crook.
Well.
And a murderer.
That's what they say. Doggone, I wish they didn't say that, though.
Well, 1 year after we broadcast that piece back in 1991, Dade County authorities installed a new phone system that kept inmates from making anything but collect calls. And they moved Danny Ferris to another prison where, because of his candor about his credit card fraud, authorities put him in isolation to guarantee an end to his jailhouse shopping days. Today, Danny Ferris is serving his life sentence at Lake Correctional Institution in Clermont, Florida, where I went to see him a couple of months ago.
Hi.
Well, look who's here.
How are you?
You've gained weight.
So nice to see you again.
You look very, very healthy.
Well, you look very healthy yourself.
Thank you very much for an old man. As we began to talk, Danny told me something I'd not heard before, that he was high on drugs the last time we talked.
No, I just smoked a joint just to take the edge off of meeting you.
What happened to you after that first piece on 60 Minutes back in 1991?
It was, my life got real intense real fast. Because this had taken place from prison, obviously measures had to be taken to ensure that that wouldn't happen again. Mm-hmm. So I was placed in what they call close management situation, which is the hole.
Solitary.
Solitary.
Life in the hole is what?
Just that. You're in a cell 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Never get out of the cell?
You take a shower 3 times a week.
Desperate to get out of isolation, desperate for human contact, this gregarious, good-natured fella asked that his life sentence be changed to a death sentence, he said, so that he could donate his organs.
Had a certain flair to it, and so
Well, it certainly had flair. Did you really want the death sentence, or this was just
actually,
an
I did.
attention-getting device?
Well, so much of my life was that, maybe still is, Mr. Wallace.
In any case, when the Florida courts turned his request down, he decided on suicide instead.
And I opened my arm here and put it inside of a garbage bag and tied the garbage bag and got back under my covers. That was my parting shot, you know, go out with a flame. But it didn't work out that way. And there's a reason for everything that happens.
The reason became very clear to him, he says, when he was finally forced to enter a drug treatment program. He's been clean and sober for over a year now, and he credits most of his recovery to this man.
Oh, this is Mr. Walensky, my therapist. Pleasure to meet you. How are you?
Mr. Walensky and I connected at a different level. When I sat across the table from him the first time, he was shooting from the hip.
What do you mean, shooting from the hip?
I mean, calling it the way it was. Look, you're a dope fiend. That's what the problem is here.
And now, Danny says, his sobriety has given him a new direction in life, because today he counsels younger inmates about their drug addiction. But does he never miss his jailhouse shopping days?
Do you ever say, hey, you know, maybe I can start working the telephones again?
I have had cellular phones since we talked, thrown at me like incoming grenades from all kinds of different places. I've been enticed with what you suggested, and I've chosen not to do it, Mr. Wallace.
Why?
Well, maybe it's self-serving. I have found peace, and I don't want to disturb that peace, and it certainly would.
You have no protégés?
No, and anyone who would claim to be, I would like to disavow any knowledge of them right now, and that's the truth.
You know a fellow by the name of Anthony Bargman or Bargman, a.k.a. Robert Williams?
Oh, the name Robert Williams sounds familiar.
A Miami-Dade police officer tells us he believes that this Bargman was a protege of yours and that he's doing more phone business at this moment, Danny, than you at the top.
Wow. You'd think he would
You
send,
jealous?
Well, not jealous, but you'd think he'd send a guy some commission or something if that were the case, Mr. Wallace. God.